southern Ontario, a place known for its serene winters and historical charm. But even the most peaceful towns have their shadows. On a frigid January night in 2018, the quiet streets of a small Niagara region town became the stage for a mystery that defied explanation. The story begins with a mundane grocery run, one tiring trip down to the store and back up. The narrator was walking the familiar path towards home, unaware that something strange was lurking in the stillness of the night. It happened in an instant, so fast that it felt more like a trick of the mind than reality. The street was empty, save for the soft glow of streetlights casting long, lonely shadows on the snow. The air was so quiet that every sound seemed amplified. The crunch of boots, the faint rattle of the grocery cart's wheels. And then, in the space between one breath and the next, something darted out from the darkness. From behind a parked car, it emerged, moving with a speed that was almost unnatural. A shadow at first, a blur against the pale snow. Then, for a brief, terrifying second, the thing came into full view, illuminated by the faint amber light of a street lamp. Its shape was impossible. The body was small, rounded, almost like a kiwi bird. But it wasn't just a bird. Not with that grotesque parrot-like beak, sharp and curved as though made for something far more sinister than cracking seeds. Its legs were thin and sinewy, bent awkwardly outward like those of a lizard, yet they propelled the creature forward with unnerving agility. The knees bent at angles that made it look as though it shouldn't be able to stand, let alone move. But its strangest feature? Its ears. They were long and rabbit-like, pressed flat against its small, misshapen head, giving it a bizarre silhouette that didn't belong to any creature on Earth that didn't make a sound. Not the crunch of snow beneath its feet, not the whisper of disturbed air as it moved, nothing. For a creature so alien, so utterly strange, its presence was unnervingly silent, as though it existed just outside the normal boundaries of reality. And yet, there it was in the flesh, or at least, I thought it was. Within barely a second, it crossed the street, moving faster than seemed possible for something with legs so spindly. It darted toward a hedge that lined the sidewalk, its motion so fluid it felt almost unreal, like watching a video sped up too fast. And then it was gone. I froze. For a moment, my mind refused to process what I had just seen. Had it really been there? Was it some trick of the light? A shadow warped by exhaustion and the faint flicker of the street lamp? No. It was too vivid, too detailed to dismiss so easily. Compelled by some mix of fear and fascination, I stepped closer, heart pounding in my chest. The hedge stood there, silent and still, as though it held no secrets. I leaned forward, peering over and around its branches, expecting to see something. A trail of disturbed snow, perhaps, or the faint rustle of movement in the bushes. But there was nothing. The snow was untouched, pristine, as if the creature had never been there at all. The silence pressed against me, heavier now, the kind that makes your ears ring and your breath catch. And in that moment, a chill far colder than the winter air crept over me. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't natural. It didn't belong. And yet, it had been here. Something about the way it moved lingered in my mind, refusing to let go. The creature's speed, its impossible silence, it felt wrong, like it had no place in the world I knew. I couldn't just walk away, not without at least trying to confirm what I'd seen. I stepped toward the hedge cautiously, the crunch of snow beneath my boots sounding deafening in the otherwise silent street. My breath clouded the air, my heartbeat a steady drumbeat in my ears. The hedge stood there, unassuming, its branches coated in a light layer of frost and dusted with fresh snow. It seemed ordinary, too ordinary. But I knew what I had seen. Pausing a few feet away, I strained my ears, listening for any sign of movement. The world was unnaturally still, as though the night itself held its breath. Not a single rustle came from the bushes, no telltale crack of twigs, no crunch of fleeing footsteps in the snow. It was as if the creature had evaporated into thin air. I took another step closer, then another, until I was standing right in front of the hedge. The air felt heavier here, colder somehow, though I couldn't explain why. My gloved hand hesitated for a moment before reaching out to part the branches. The brittle twigs brushed against my fingertips as I pulled them aside, exposing the ground beyond nothing. The snow on the other side was untouched, a pristine, unbroken sheet of white. It was as though no living thing had crossed it in hours, let alone mere seconds ago. My eyes darted across the ground, searching for any sign. A footprint, a trail, a depression in the snow. But there was nothing. I stepped around to the other side of the hedge, my pulse quickening. Could it have doubled back somehow? Or hidden somewhere I hadn't thought to check? The thought was unnerving, the idea that it might still be nearby, watching me from some unseen vantage point. The street stretched out in both directions, empty and silent, bathed in the faint amber glow of the streetlights. Everything appeared normal, and yet, it didn't feel normal. There was a sense of wrongness that I couldn't shake, as though the air itself carried some invisible weight. I crouched down, running a hand lightly across the snow. Still, there were no tracks. No indication that anything had disturbed the ground where I had seen it vanish. And yet, I couldn't convince myself that I had imagined it. The image of that strange, twisted creature was burned into my mind's eye, every unnatural detail vivid and undeniable. As I stood and brushed the frost from my gloves, I felt a chill, not from the winter air, but from deep within. I couldn't explain it, but it felt as though something was still here, lingering in the shadows, watching, waiting. I turned back toward the street, glancing over my shoulder one last time. The hedge was just a hedge, or so it seemed, but the silence around it felt louder than ever, a subtle warning to leave and never look back. By the time I reached my mom's apartment, the cold outside had seeped through my jacket, but the chill running down my spine wasn't from the winter air. I couldn't shake the image of what I'd seen, or the strange, haunting silence that accompanied it. I needed to tell someone, to make sense of it, to hear someone else say it was nothing, that I was imagining things. I knocked on the door, and my mom greeted me with her usual warm smile. Inside, the apartment was cozy, the air thick with the scent of freshly brewed tea. My sister was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone, and my mom's boyfriend was sitting at the kitchen table, his attention half focused on a crossword puzzle. The scene was so ordinary, so normal, that it felt surreal after what I had just experienced. "You look like you've seen a ghost," my mom said with a laugh, but her smile faded when she saw the look on my face. "I think I might have," I replied, dropping my grocery bags near the door and taking off my coat. My voice was steadier than I expected, but my hands trembled slightly as I recounted the encounter. Every detail spilled out: the creature's strange shape, its unnatural speed, the eerie silence, and the way it vanished without a trace. They listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief to something bordering on unease. My sister, always the skeptic, raised an eyebrow and said, "Are you sure it wasn't just some weird bird? Like an owl or something?" "It wasn't a bird," I insisted. "Not any bird I've ever seen. Its legs were all wrong. Its body, it didn't move like an animal. It was too fast, too quiet." My mom's boyfriend chimed in, his voice calm but speculative. "Could have been an exotic pet. People keep all kinds of strange animals these days. Maybe it got loose." The theory sounded plausible enough, but it didn't sit right with me. If it was a pet, how did it not leave tracks? The snow wasn't disturbed at all, and it didn't make a sound, not even when it moved. My mom nodded slowly, as though trying to piece it together herself. "It does sound strange, but maybe your mind's playing tricks on you. It's late, it's dark. Sometimes shadows can look like..." "No," I interrupted, more forcefully than I intended. "I know what I saw." And it wasn't a shadow. The room fell silent for a moment, the only sound the faint hum of the heater in the corner. Then, almost as if on cue, we all flinched at the sound of voices outside. It was a group of young men, speaking hurriedly in Spanish, their tone urgent and alarmed. We moved toward the window, peeking out cautiously. "Did you find it?" one of them shouted. Another responded, panic clear in his voice. "Where did it go?" For a moment, we all exchanged glances. The tension was thick in the room now, the warmth of the apartment doing little to chase away the growing unease. Whatever I had seen, it seemed I wasn't the only one looking for it, or fearing it. The voices outside broke through the quiet, sharp and urgent, jolting all of us from the uneasy calm that had settled in the room. We moved toward the window cautiously, peeking through the frosted glass. A group of young men had gathered near the entrance to my apartment building, their body language frantic. They were bundled up against the cold, but the way they moved, gesturing wildly and pacing back and forth, made it clear they weren't just out for a casual walk. I strained to hear what they were saying. At first, it was all in Spanish, their voices quick and panicked. Then, one of them switched to English, shouting, "Did you find it?" Another man ran toward the group, shaking his head. "No. Where did it go?" Their fear was palpable, even from a distance. The way they glanced over their shoulders and scanned the surrounding area gave me the distinct impression they weren't searching for something small or harmless. Whatever it was they were looking for, it had clearly rattled them. And that sent a fresh wave of unease through me. "Do you think they're looking for?" my sister whispered, her skepticism from earlier replaced by a nervous edge. "I don't know," I replied, my voice barely audible. The timing was too perfect, though. Too coincidental. We continued to watch as one of the men pulled out a flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. He swept it across the snow-covered ground, pausing to inspect shadows near parked cars and bushes. The others followed closely, their movements tense and purposeful, as if they expected the thing to leap out at any moment. My mom's boyfriend spoke softly, breaking the silence in the room. "If they're that scared, it's not just a pet they lost." The comment hung in the air, heavy with implication. Whatever they were chasing, it wasn't something ordinary. I couldn't shake the thought that I had just seen it moments earlier. Was it still nearby? Was it watching them? Or worse, watching us? Outside, the men's search seemed to grow more desperate. One of them pointed toward a cluster of trees at the edge of the parking lot, and they all hurried in that direction. For a moment, I thought I saw movement, a shadow that didn't belong to the trees, slipping deeper into the darkness. "Do you think it's dangerous?" my mom asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know," I replied honestly. The truth was, I didn't want to know. Whatever that thing was, it wasn't something I wanted to encounter again. We stayed by the window for a while longer, watching as the men disappeared into the shadows beyond the parking lot. Their voices faded, but the tension remained, thick and unrelenting. As I stepped away from the window, I couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't over yet. Something about the way they moved, the fear in their voices, it felt like a warning. Whatever was out there wasn't finished. After a while, the voices outside grew distant, the group of men disappearing into the shadows beyond the parking lot. But their urgency lingered, hanging in the cold night air like a warning. Inside, we sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their fear pressing down on us. "What do you think they were looking for?" my sister finally asked, breaking the silence. Her usual skepticism was gone, replaced with a nervous edge. "I don't know," I replied quietly, the unease in my chest tightening. "But it has to be connected to what I saw. It can't just be a coincidence." My mom glanced toward the window, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweater. "Should we call someone? The police? Maybe? What if it's dangerous?" I shook my head, unsure. What would we even tell them? That I saw something strange? They'd probably think I'm crazy, her boyfriend chimed in, his voice calm but thoughtful. "Even if you called, they'd need more than just a story. Besides, it seems like those guys know what they're looking for. Maybe they'll handle it." The logic was sound, but it didn't bring me any comfort. The image of the creature, the way it had moved, the unnatural silence surrounding it, was burned into my mind. And the memory of those men, searching with such desperation, only made it worse. I finally stood, grabbing my coat. "I should get back home," I said, though the idea of stepping back outside made my stomach churn. "Are you sure?" my mom asked, worry evident in her eyes. "I'll be fine," I assured her, though I didn't believe it myself as they saw me off. We exchanged hurried goodbyes, their concern etched into every word. Stepping outside, the night felt even colder, the silence deeper than before. I glanced around, half expecting to see movement in the shadows, but the street appeared empty. Still, the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. I gripped my coat tightly and walked quickly toward my building, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind me, the darkness seemed alive, as though something unseen was following, just out of sight. I didn't dare look back.